Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. Just want to share some thoughts with you in regards to atheism, right? Atheism, this idea. And I want us to really just reflect upon this for a second. This great challenge that we see it as today, or obviously it's dying down now, but with this great challenge that's out there, godlessness.
Is atheism dying down? I don't really notice atheism dying down. I mean, if you look at the statistics, the nuns group is growing, which the nuns group isn't primarily atheist. The nuns group contains people that just don't identify with any one religion or any religion at all, as well as people that are godless. So the point is, though, is that group is rising, and I've only noticed an increase in godless people. So it kind of seems to me like it's not dying down. Maybe it's dying down to him because he's not paying attention to that particular community. Maybe it seems like he's getting more Muslims on his YouTube page, or he's interacting more and more with Muslims rather than atheists. I don't know, but I really don't understand why he would think that atheists are dying out. I don't know. It's still a community that's going strong, or at least a demographic that's going strong.
We really worry ourselves too much about this. It's almost like the dog without any teeth. We fear this thing which really is impotent. And I want us to reflect upon it from this perspective.
I'm sorry, did he just call atheists or atheism impotent? I don't know how we're impotent as far as our arguments go. I mean, I feel like atheism has pretty strong arguments against, particular definitions of God. I think that it's a pretty rational conclusion to come to when we have the evidence that we do, or rather, we don't have the evidence that many people claim that we do. I feel like, it's not really all that impotent to just think rationally about the evidence that we have, instead of lazily thinking, oh, well, there has to be a God. Look, I've got Legos in a bag. You think those just formed into a helicopter by chance? Ah! I mean, we're not doing any kind of lazy thinking like that. We're honestly engaging in the question, and we're rationally coming to a conclusion. So I don't see how we're impotent.
Atheism or atheists make a claim, or they believe that there is no God, there are no gods. This is a positive claim. This is not like being an agnostic where you say, I don't know, I suspend my judgment until I have good reasons to believe. They're actually saying they believe that there is no creator, there is no God.
Well, just a little bit of a correction here, because, I mean, that would describe some atheists out there, but it definitely doesn't describe all atheists like he's making it out to be. Atheists aren't some monolithic group that only think one thing, that gods do not exist. The ones that he is describing are typically called hard atheists or gnostic atheists. Those would be the people that are making the positive claim that no gods exist. And they do have arguments for their position, although I find it to be a little hard to defend that position when obviously we don't have perfect knowledge. We don't know what could come in the future. So it's hard for me to put down such a hard answer on that question. That's why I remain an agnostic in general about God's existence. But if we're talking about specific definitions of God, like the Islamic God, or rather the Abrahamic God, which is the same God that's used for Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, if that's the God that you're talking about, then I would definitely fall into the camp that he's talking about, that God specifically does not exist. I would totally say that is a positive belief that I have. But if we're going to be going that route, then you have to acknowledge the fact that we do make arguments that show that God simply isn't the God that exists if one does. And speaking monolithically about the atheist demographic as if they are saying that in general gods do not exist, I think is painting with a broad brush. And I don't think that Imram here would really appreciate it if we started painting all Muslims with a broad brush. And similarly with Christians, I don't think Christians would like for anybody to paint them with a broad brush as being some monolithic group. Typically, painting a group or demographic broadly like that is a bad way to go, because you're not acknowledging the nuances that exist and the differences that exist within said demographic. But just to be clear, I'm an agnostic atheist. That would be a soft atheist, is another way in order to say that. So my full position is I don't know if a God exists in general, but I don't believe one to exist. And then if we get into more specific God definitions, then I would consider myself a Gnostic atheist or a hard atheist. And I believe that those gods don't exist.
So here's a question. Can this claim really be validated? Is this a sound, intelligent, rational position? Well, if you were to ask the atheist, well, what proof do you have to make such a claim, such a definitive claim that there is no God, there is no creator? They will turn around and have to acknowledge that they have no evidence for this. But very quickly, they would also retort by saying, well, there is no good reasons to believe. There is no evidence to believe. Now, if they stop there, then, well, technically, they should really be an agnostic, not really an atheist making a positive claim.
Well, you see here, what he's doing is he's convoluting the conversation. He's talking about gods in general, when in reality, he doesn't consider gods in general to be possible. He considers only his God is the one true God. So it's not really just all gods that we're talking about. It's specifically his definition of God. And it is rational to come to the conclusion that his particular God simply doesn't exist. Mainly because we don't have good evidence for his particular God. Obviously, he does have arguments for his God's existence, but we can explain to him why those pieces of evidence don't support his conclusion. And alternatively, if we're saying that his God doesn't exist, we don't just say that as if it's a presumed fact. We say that because that is the conclusion that we've come to after analyzing the evidence that has been presented. It requires somebody that has a definition of God to first present reasons and evidence for thinking that that God exists in order for us to analyze whether or not we are convinced that that God exists. And the thing is that atheists have done that. We've looked at their evidence and we have reasons as to why we're not convinced that that God exists. So is it rational? Yes, it's totally rational. Is it reasonable to say that there's no good evidence that supports the conclusion that the God of Islam or Christianity or any Abrahamic faith, because they're all using the same God there, is it reasonable to come to the conclusion that that God doesn't exist? Totally. Because the evidence doesn't support the conclusion. So he's trying to make it out to be like atheists have this unreasonable position and they're being irrational by not believing in God. But that's really not the case when you honestly look at the real situation.